2019 to order. Welcome everyone. Here for those who I missed. First order of business is consider approval of the Parks and Recreation Board meeting minutes. I have two corrections if no one else does. Spelling of my name. Section C. Yes, it says punches. Section C, first sentence, and section C further down. And I can show you that individually if you can. Any other corrections, comments? Motion.
I move we approve the minutes.
Second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And the minutes pass. Second item of business. We're going to receive a report from our visitors here. We'll discuss the Razor Ranch Park.
Thank you.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. My name's Charles Hodges. I'm with Hodges Architecture, and we're pleased to come show you what we've been working on with Drew and Gary and Jason for the last several months. And we'll kind of give you a little bit of history on Razor, the original GDP. I think I've been working on it since my kids were this tall, but I think it's actually been like 14 years. But, so we can start really with the original vision. This is the South Side Master Plan. This is in its current state. Miraculously, that from Heritage Trail East really hasn't changed much since the original plans we did for the south side of Razor. It's always anticipated having density residential surrounding the park there that you see there in the center. It has included various densities. Our zoning is from 30 units to the acre up to actually that end track right where the cursor was is at 100 units to acre. We don't think we'll ever achieve any of that, but we think that it was important at the time that we recast the entire TIF and GDP back when we actually built US 380. It was a private project. TxDOT didn't do 380 improvements. We actually built it private and worked with the city on that because of the lack of funding and the lack of TxDOT ability at the time. So a lot's really evolved. The town center itself, as you know, has now added several components. We're blessed to have the Embassy Suites. I think that's a landmark project. I think it's one that really anchors the south end of the west half of the project. The addition of the entertainment users, our firm did the Alamo Draft House, which was there yesterday. Very pleased with the way that's evolving. The Andy B's is undergoing their soft opening, I think, right now, just training and getting things going. Rooms to Go is a great building and certainly hallmarks that south end also. So what we really wanted to create was something that had direct adjacency to the retail services and all the restaurants from the residential density. But to have a great residential core, you really need a centerpiece. And so we follow a lot of the principles of healthy spaces and places, which is a group that's a conceptual group out of Australia when they talk about passive park design. So we utilize a lot of their theories and we've done so here. We've tried to create multiple venues, not just one big open barren space, but multiple venues so that you feel a little bit more intimate, a little cozier, a little more pocket park kind of feel to it. Mike, if we can go to the next slide. Let's go on to the next slide. There we go. So a little bit rendered of what we're talking about here. We've created really three components, one being the cursor position right now, which is the southwest component. That's an area that is a passive play field. It's also an area that incorporates an interior walk. And one of the main hallmarks of the design is the berm configuration, where we have the four main berms and two smaller berms there that traverse the site. Those berms are approximately 12 feet tall. They create topography that really, it was a rolling hilltop. When I was in school at Tech, I passed this every weekend. I lusted after that ranch because my family's always been in that business. It was a beautiful piece of land. And that hilltop setting was always something that, I guess Hillview Ranch was really the name before it was Razor Ranch. So we wanted to create some roll and some topo. We had excess dirt to utilize, and we've done so in the positioning of the berms. But we also wanted to create the pocketing of the park, create multiple spaces with different feel so that you might enjoy one activity in one time and one activity in a different pocket or area the next time. To the far left of the slide is the area we're incorporating some service facilities from a commercial standpoint. My vision is to have a miniature of them. If you're familiar with Mutts and you're familiar with the Katy Trail Ice House, trail adjacency, it's a great amenity. It's one that has a large percentage of outdoor seating space, and a smaller percentage of indoor seating space. So the west element that you see there on the lower left would be our version of Mutts. If you're not familiar with Mutts, the dog park in downtown Dallas, it's basically a food eatery, dog eatery, and dog park with beverage service and a lot of outdoor seating and dining. It's been globally successful. And if you're not familiar with Katy Trail Ice House, it's a trailside eatery and a lot of under the tree canopy outdoor seating again. And it's one of the most successful restaurants in Texas. In fact, their beverage sales on any given month are $700,000 to $800,000 just in beverages. This number 2 in the study right now. So in order to do that, it enables us to draw the line where that dark gray line directly adjacent traverses would be the boundary of the 9.8 acre park development with the ancillary development to the north. And each of those components represent about 1.5 on the 2 park components there with the berms on either side, and then the larger ones down where it says 9.87, you're in about 2.5 acre range. So overall, it's 9.87 acres of dedication, interior and exterior sidewalks and pathways. I like formal alleys in some part of a plan. You can incorporate both curvilinear walks and experience with a more formal promenade or alley down the center. So we've done both here. And then we've got, in line with Linden Street, we've got, with Crescent Street. The terminus of Crescent is really a small gateway into the park. As you're going westbound on Crescent, you come up and you cross East Park Boulevard. That crossing, if you will, we're on the other side, Mike, up at the north. There you go, right there. So that's your terminus. That's a place where you're vehicular to that point, but then you enter the park, pedestrian or bicycle, and we think that's a good transition point. We put a crosswalk there that transitions if you're wanting to leave your apartment off Crescent or your residential, which is directly east. Remember that we have cottage housing. The local developer has purchased or is purchasing that property, Virgil Strange, and we'll be building cottage housing on 3 particular tracts along Bonnie Bray as part of our GDP approval. And if you want to walk directly across, go to the cinema and go on into, or go to any of the other restaurants, you can traverse the park by that crosswalk. The apex of the promenade and that crosswalk gives us another interesting plaza, and we'll get into the detail of that in just a second. Next slide, Mike. So here's a little bit of a vision of what we look at as we fly around the park. This is starting at the north end, moving towards the south. These density residential buildings are simplistic models that we use when we're modeling one of these. They're not intended to be final architecture. All the buildings out there won't be white, but as you can see, that crosswalk in the terminus, the small plaza, we bring people into the park, not only along the street, but also bring into the park with a curvilinear walkscape, which we think gives some further relief if you want a bicycle, pedestrian, quick walk on the street side and a little slower stroll on the inside. We think that gives you, again, a different feel to different components of the park. Now we're moving to the south end of the park. This would be where Linden crosses the park in this position. And we're gonna, can we pause just for a second there, Mike? Back up a second, or do we need to run the whole track? There we go.
A little further?
A little further. Yeah. There to the right where you see the stone walls, and the ends of the stone walls will form the cut of the berm. So that's really the more formal gate into the promenade or the formal alley. And that's an area where we would like to celebrate some of the history. And we need to talk a little bit about the theory and conjecture on history of the park. We would like to celebrate some of the natural attributes of this area, the historical aspect of the Chisholm Trail just to the west. We think this is an opportunity to educate, which we've done in many of our other developments. If you're familiar with Frisco Bridges, that's where we put all the 1.25 life-size steer sculptures. I know Gary and Drew have been down and looked at this. We actually put the herd there in bronze, and it stretches. It's one of the largest, longest, not largest, I guess, in physical size, one of the longest continuous theme bronze sculpture assemblages in North America. And we tell the story of the Sedalia Trail, which was the Preston Trail, established in the 1800s and closed in 1867, when actually the herds moved west and began using the Chisholm Trail because Sedalia, Missouri closed out as far as a railhead. So we've got an opportunity to celebrate the history, not only some of the Denton history. If you have seen what I've done on the north side, where I used the historical photographs of downtown Denton, some of the merchants on the buildings to the north, I like to celebrate that kind of history, and I like to use that kind of artifact. So we think that there's going to be a place here on these stone walls to tell a history of not only the trail, but also of Denton and its evolution. So it becomes an educational teaching piece. We've done this in the Wolf Ranch project in Georgetown. It's been an award-winning example of where you can mix native grasses and really tell people what it was like on the savannah in 1860. And I'd like to come back to that, and that's really the base reason for what we're doing with the ornamental grasses around the edges of the berm. So your berms on the exterior side, normally the traffic and the harsh side will be where you have the native grasses. Now, there's still a lot of conjecture among the species. I know staff's worked with us to suggest some things. If you're looking at what the really belly deep to a horse trail array of grasses was back when the trail was active, it's going to be big blue, little blue stem. It's going to be side oats, grama, windmill grass. It's not as showy as some of the more developed cultivars. Now, I'm a fan of the bigger, showier grasses that get the golden seed heads and the golden stems in the wintertime. They're as pretty, if not prettier in winter than they are in summer. So we'll continue to work with staff on that, but we need to make sure that we educate on what those native grasses were like. And here are examples of those, and this is what the prairie looked like. This was called the Grand Prairie at that time. And when you study the Grand Prairie, you study that's where the term belly deep to a horse was. Grass was belly deep to a horse. And that's why they grazed the trails through here, because two things. They could go along these ridges all the way to the Red River and hit Domes Crossing to the west, or Red River Station, or Preston Bend to the east. And they didn't have to cross a lot of big rivers. That's why the Preston Ridge is what it is, and that's over there on 289 and up through that area through Prosper. This ridge ran north, and then you've got the river system to the west. And then, so this gave them another alley to run from what was Cedar Springs to the south. Cedar Springs was where they watered the herds before there was any Dallas. When they were coming up through, they watered Cedar Springs, which is now Turtle Creek. So all of this has great historical relevance, and I'd like for us to tell that story. I've even suggested incorporating sculpture. I know we did the steers for the Ranching Heritage Museum in Lubbock at Tech. They used our steers from Frisco because we had researched those steers. It might be a place where the founding families up here will have an opportunity to donate, and we create a centerpiece along this promenade where we could incorporate some public sculpture. And I think telling that story of the herds, much like we did in Frisco, would be something that I think would be not only educational, but I think it also lends some anchorage to the community and the history of why Denton is where it is. So, let's move on, Mike. I can talk about that all day. We're talking about passive parks. When we talk about neighborhood parks, it's spelled that way because this is the Australian text, but you know, there is a somewhat of a different attitude when you've got density residential and people want decompression. They don't really want to go out and play games. They want to get out and they want to sit and they want to breathe and they want to open up and relax. And so the definition of that type of park space for a neighborhood park is not hard play fields, because we've all studied and know the trends of what's going on participation play fields, particularly in older populations or adult populations. So places just to sit, and I've tried to create groves of trees on tops of the berms. If we can go back a couple, Mike, that's fine. Groves of trees on top of berms, so it's just a quiet place to sit. There may be a lot of active play, kids running and having a great time. And quite frankly, the berms are passive play sculpture, because if you give a kid a grassy slope, he'll run up and down it for an hour. He doesn't need screaming, he doesn't need video games. He'll run up and down that for an hour and just play and have fun. And then if parents want to sit under the grove of trees on the top and they can, you know, supervise, it's a quiet place to sit and read. But it's also a place that separates you a little bit from the more active walkways and promenades. So just wanted to try to create something that had different pockets and different areas to enjoy different activities. Okay, thanks, Mike. We can go on. There is some, I was alluding to that last paragraph where, you know, the active field-based sports is waning and people are finding more passive utilization. Plus, in this particular location, you got to find a sports complex I have ever seen anywhere, anytime. We work in 36 states, and that North Lake complex is the best I've ever seen. I mean, who ever thought a city would have a driving range and the tennis facilities that it has? I mean, it's just incredible. So you've got that asset. I'm trying to create something that is a little bit more soft and passive and more in tune with letting people get out and decompress. So. Also, within a good 3-iron from this, well, if you hit the concrete, 2 good 3-irons, you can, you know, you'll hit McKenna Park. McKenna's got the plays, it's got the static plays, fields and facilities. So we're gonna be a part of that skill set that entire western Denton has, but we wanna be a little softer. Diverse topography, this is actually from your criteria manual, and the diverse topography, although, I mean, some people would say, well, we don't necessarily want you to create the mounting and everything, but that's really what makes it have character. Instead of a flat, bounded by streets on 4 sides, it gives you an opportunity to do something that's much different. So, next one, Mike. We can delve into the different species of trees, but as I said, we mix the species. We did the Arboretum in Charlotte. And we put 52 species of trees out there. I like having different things happen, different foliage, different times of year, different blooms. I love trees that bloom at the absolute worst time of August. I think that's a credit to the mix that we create. There should be different things happening. It shouldn't be a monoculture of one tree. You can create small mottes or groves or gathering of trees, and you know, we'll continue to tweak this with staff, with Gary and Drew and everybody, but we just needed to get started. So you can see informal patterning of tree placement, formal patterning along the esplanade. But even there, I mixed trees that would be blooming in August with trees that would be more of a deciduous.
Are those arcs there, is that topography, or is that?
I'm sorry.
The arcs that are kind of coming across from that?
That actually is topography, because we had a gentle slope there. Let's talk about that for a second. This is the north end of the park, and I had created this so that we had a menu for an amphitheater, or for a production, or for the 1 o'clock lab band coming out and doing a holiday show. And we kind of got into a lot of semantics about who's gonna operate, who's gonna own, all that. What we finally just settled on, we provided a pervious pavement crossing for servicing, and then we're going to pour a solid pad that would become the foundation for whatever venue we wanted to set up, whether it's on grade, a stage set, if Parks has some special holiday program we wanna do, great. But I set that up on that north end, so that smaller pocket became an amphitheater. So you have stadium-like seating, like a TPC golf course, on the berms, on the sides, and then we reduced the berm along the back down to only a 6-foot berm. One visual transition between the two pieces, but also it still gave us a little bit of a stadium seating to the back. Yes, ma'am.
Just want to make sure I'm looking at this, on the other side of the pavement, is that where the restaurant you were talking
Yes.
about?
To the left. So in doing so, it gave us a little bit of more of a visual connection, but it still maintained this as an area that's passive play. It still has the central promenade walk down the center of it. I did not place the trees there because obviously that'd be a visibility issue if you did have a stage set up there. You don't want the trees blocking all the visuals. But I think it's an area that we can all just let it evolve. It may set up as a farmer's market. I'm a big fan of Aspen wine and food, and you know, there's no reason we can't do some food festivals and things in this park. It's just how it gets programmed. The devil's in the details, but we were just trying to give us multiple opportunities, multiple venues, and not do such a hard and fast plan that we weren't flexible to evolve. Next one, Mike. This would be the other end to the south. This has that formal gate that we talked about with the stone walls there on the right, where Mike is. And then that's your entrance from the Linden Street exposure, and then enables us to start telling that story of the history, some of the entablatures or plaques, to be able to do that, and I'll show you examples of that in just a second. But this one has a little bit different feel, a bigger grove. That area is a picnic area. If you want to go out and just throw a blanket and have a, you know, bottle of wine, I guess you can have a bottle of wine here in the park, can't you? At some point. But it's a little larger because I wanted that where if a group wanted to go up and sit under the grove of trees and have a little gathering there, it's a great place for it. Our berm tops are a little too narrow on most of the others to do that. But there I wanted to create something where a group could go up there and just sit and have an event, if you will. But again, this is the formal entry to the promenade going north. In the middle there, you see a little lens. And that lens is a place to pause. We can surround that with benches, and then that's the place I would suggest we start with our sculpture, if we're gonna put sculpture there. That's a good place to stop because it's away from the street exposure, it's a little quieter, gives us a place to pause, and it's also an interesting point along the promenade. So just a suggestion that we do that. Next slide, Mike. I know y'all want to get to see the football game, but I'll go fast. So that's detail, let's skip that. Again, let's skip that, plant list. We're submitting all of that. This is a regular configuration of irrigation. I'm suggesting we go with the golf course heads. We'll have to pay for a booster pump. We incorporated that in some of our estimates, but I don't think we ought to have that many heads out here. If we're gonna have this type of open area, soft and passive, we work with Drew, and they've given us suggestions now for the city preferred Rainbird version of the big Toro long-term golf head. There's less to maintain, there's less to run over with the mowers, there's less to have people step on. It's just, I'm suggesting we don't go with this, and we go with the new version that we've been working with Drew and Gary on. But everything is, excuse me, everything is irrigated on the native grasses side. We would be doing drip. We would not be doing spray head on that side. So I think that's important for a lot of reasons. One, that's low low water consumption planting. That's why they were successful in the Grand Prairies, because they were low water consumption. So that way we'll be able to care for our hardened grass turf in a different way than we care for the native grasses. Next slide, please, Mike. No, we can skip that, more stuff. So here is our perspective, if you will. This would be again on the south end, looking at that grand gate with the historical plaques on the sides there, starting to make that introduction. You see the alley that goes all the way. You see how the trees drop off at the crosswalk. Next slide. This would be, that restaurant's not gonna be near that big. That just happened to be a model that our guide dropped in there. It would be about a third that size. But from here, then you get the adjacency, so you can see it really becomes the service facility for the park itself. If somebody wants to take a 50-yard walk, they can get something to eat, walk back up on the tops of the berms and enjoy their lunch. There's no limitation there. But it's not one where we have to burden the facilities of the park department by having to create all these freestanding service facilities. It can be part of and parcel of this development, and it's not a burden on the maintenance upkeep or even the CapEx for the parks. Next one, please, Mike. This is the open area. This is why you can see those people in the upper right standing on that performance pad. That's why I didn't want to put trees in here, because this would have you would be sitting on the 6-foot berm here looking back towards the stage location. And we still have the esplanade continuing down the center, but no trees on that esplanade, because it would end up killing all of this building angles of performance. Thanks, Mike. This would be at the entry point to the performance. You can barely see the restaurants in the far end, but we would have another series of walls. This is another area. This is at the crossroads we talked about. And these walls are another opportunity for us to do our entablatures or our history. We might choose a different perspective of history here to celebrate than the Chisholm or the Herds or any of the natural, to maybe do something more important here with more current development, the evolution of the schools. It could be a lot of things that really helped the commercial and industrial and finally the development of Denton. It was real interesting to me. I've got a book that references crumb at one time, because the wheat on the Grand Prairie was such a prolific crop that Crumb, Texas was the #1 exporting center for wheat sales in the United States. I was stunned. I mean, who'd thought that? But those are things that I think we ought to teach people, and I think even life in Denton. I've got some books that reference. One of the books that I use a lot for references are the Trail Drivers of Texas. If you really want to research the Western history of Texas, there was a gathering in 1905, and they got all the guys from all over Texas that actually drove the herds up, gathered them in a hotel, and they sat for 3 days and scripted, literally wrote down everything they remember. And they talked about life in Denton. They talked about the fact that it was tough. It was hard scrabble, tough life, but they didn't complain about it. It'd really be good for some of the kids to read about what life was really like when they were establishing Denton. It was a hard life, but they made it and they established the community and they never complained. So I think those are the kinds of stories we ought to be able to tell here and make this a place. Frisco, for instance, when I did that, I thought, well, I hope everybody appreciated that. The first group that came was a group of urban planning students from Mississippi State to explore. They had heard about this. They wanted to see and photograph what we had done there to celebrate the history of the area and mix that with commercial development. So, it was complimentary to the efforts we've made. We show iron benches here. I actually want to use butter sticks. If you're familiar with the butter sticks, that's basically the 6-foot slabs of limestone come from Luger's out north of Abilene. And the grinders don't scratch them. They don't jump their skateboards on them. They don't tear them up. They don't get hot. That's one thing we've got to really be careful about, is we're going to have a population here that's going to be, we're already under contract with our senior living facility, which we've been working on forever, senior multifamily. It's 55 and over. But they're very active, and they're gonna be in this park every day. So the passive nature of the park really yields to what they like to do. We'll also have AL memory, and those residents and guests will be visiting the park on a constant basis. So you gotta be careful about the surfaces. So I like using the butter sticks because they're natural, they're anti-grinders. The skateboard jumpers, the bike guys don't jump up and slide down them. And they stay light colored, and that, therefore, they're gonna be cooler in the summertime. Next slide, Mike. So at the crossing points, you begin to see the little entablatures there. I think we can, this is the 6-foot berm that you see on the left. I've got a double row of trees on it to kind of form a little bit of a terminus and give a little bit of light privacy into what would be the potential amphitheater on the north. But at these points, we also have opportunities to do the historical and the educational and the interpretive pieces. So this might be a place where we end up planting small plots of the native grasses and then talking about each one of these. We did this at Wolf Ranch. It won an Urban Natural Landscape Award for Texas. But we were just trying to educate people on the types of native grasses that were there when it was undeveloped. Next slide, Mike. That's really not a representation of anything other than that's a position that we're holding as a reserve for an interpretive board. We actually want to use a different style. Go to the next slide. This would be your linden walls again, looking north with the big grove up to the left, the larger berm top. And then the native grasses again softening and buffering all of the edges. Next slide, Mike. Pushing them right up. I think we're really working on right now having a 10-foot mow strip. Gary, correct me if I'm wrong. But we're actually going to widen the grass strip between the native grasses and the edge of the sidewalk to a 10-foot mow strip. This is obviously not 10 feet. But point being is I think we're going to widen out so we've got a mowable margin there and not letting the native grasses hang out onto the walkway. So a little bit broader buffer there. So this is the type I would like to use. They're the two-legged. Actually, you've got a miniature version of this out in the park directly adjacent to the building here. But I'd like to use these around, and I'd like to give multiple opportunities to tell the stories, the natural history, all of these around the development. They would be a two-legged version, not that sort of Star Wars looking thing that was on the rendering, but two-legged version with a beveled face and being able to do the interpretives in series where we might have around that lens, we might have 3 on each side so we could tell a lot of information there. Next. Pardon me. So it would be the central detail there, the two-legged with the bevel. We would use the graphics in a colored version, much like what is produced there on the right. They actually talk about the root systems of the native plants. To the left, those walls that we talked about would be Luder's limestone, which has been our hallmark material throughout Razor, both north of 380 and south. I'd like to use that same material for our walls and then add the plaques onto it. Next slide. This would be an example of the type of plaque we would use that has both photography, which is going to hold attention. If we just put a bunch of text up there, you're going to lose, they're going to glaze over in about 3 seconds. So having the mix of the historical photography, which Denton's got a really rich library of that, we were able to use that for our scanner murals on the north. And I think we'll be able to incorporate that here also. Next slide, Mike. So let's get down to nuts and bolts. So we're dedicating about 9.8 acres. That's way more than would be required even in our GDP density model. So we use the formulas that have been utilized here. Basically, the overlay allows us about 1,800 multifamily units at 1.8 residents and about 251 calculated max single-family units, which is the stuff that Virgil will be doing along Bonnie Bray. And in order to do all that and apply y'all's formulas to it, it would require about a 7.5 acre dedication. And that 7.5 acres is 2 acres, 2.3 acres less than what we're actually dedicating. So we're putting a lot of margin on it. I wish we could achieve that density because density is successful if it's handled correctly, but we're not gonna get there. And I think what we're really saying is we're gonna not get to that density. We just wanted to prove and show that we're over dedicating in acres in relationship to the densities that we see as reality out there. Next slide, Mike. So that's really a short form version of how we've come to what we have come to, what we're trying to express, how we're trying to make the interior of the park feel different than the perimeter, the exterior perimeter of the park. And the fact that we're trying to facilitate the pedestrian patterns that the grand plan has created, but we're trying to do it in such a way that we have different tiers. You can actually see that there is a grade transition to the east of the promenade, and you'll actually have another slope there that provides for other opportunities in these play areas, the softer areas, the groves on top of the berms. I just really want it to feel like you go there 3 times and you have 3 different experiences. And I think that's gonna be key. If it's barren hectares, as I say, that's just gonna be one monoculture grass. It's not gonna have any character, it's not gonna have any topography, and it's really not gonna be that sculpted piece that is the centerpiece of the whole razor piece. So, happy to answer questions.
I've got one.
Yes, sir.
I think this looks like a great amenity for all of those residents in that area, but as a resident that's about a mile from there, I would love to go too, and I don't see a real plan for people that are not from that area to pull a car up anywhere, or
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
Can we go back to the GDP, like the second slide or first slide? Let's talk about that, because I purposely pulled, I originally started with parallel parking along, and I could never get comfortable with the fact that I was asking people to come play, and then lining that up with potential liability of a kid running between those cars out into those streets. I just couldn't do it. You know, no apologies, I just couldn't do it. But, Mike, can you zoom in?
Not really,
No? Well, that would have been good if you could. Let's start, that's okay, you can't.
no. No, this is just,
That's fine, let's stop right there. The street that's going directly vertical from there has parallel parking on both sides. That's Crescent, I can control that. It's not adjacent to the play fields, it's off to the side. The opportunity for a kid to chase a ball, or anybody to fall off their bike, or whatever happens, is not on East Park Boulevard, and it's not on Heritage Trail. Heritage Trail is too fast to have parallel parking there. It's just, it only takes one, it's too fast. So I took it off. I had it, thought it might be good for the park, and then I took it away. So,
Charles, you don't have parking on the one side of East Park?
I do on the, yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
But, so, stay right where you were, Mike. So going vertical, we've got parallel parking on both sides of Crescent. That's all the way to Bonnie Bray. On East Park Boulevard, that you see there, I left it on the east side of East Park,
The far side from the park.
across the street, because I could feel okay about that. I just could never get it on the edge of the park. Now, when we're having a gathering, obviously, we're gonna have thousands of parking spaces around here with a comfortable walk. It's kind of like Frisco with the ballpark. You know, people park at the mall, they park and they walk across to the ballpark. I'd rather them do that in a controlled area than have those lining parking spaces right around it. And also in off times, and you're never gonna prevent somebody from doing this, they'll be able to park at Mutt's and they're gonna walk across into the park, but if they bought food at the Ice House and they walked over there and enjoyed it, well, mission accomplished, that's okay. So I just couldn't put it in a dangerous spot. I've got a lot out there, I just didn't put it in places I feared.
Charles, will they be able to park at Winco?
I don't know what the REA says at Winco.
So that would be premier parking, but I don't think Winco would love it.
Well, I just don't know. I mean, Kevin, you may be able to answer that, but there's probably an REA that guarantees cross parking with Winco and the rest of the center, is there not?
All of Razor Ranch Town Center has cross parking.
Yes. So the question is gonna be, when we're having an event, let's say that we have a seasonal program in the amphitheater, I'd have a hard time thinking Winco's gonna have a hard time with that.
I mean, couldn't park units above there, right? I mean, they could,
I'm sorry, say again?
the orange up there, that's no parking.
Inside that.
That's inside the
That's
multifamily,
out.
yeah.
What about south of Heritage Trail? Right, you're right, what about all that? What is that?
That's all in the multifamily, inside the multifamily.
So that's another multifamily, so
Yeah.
that's out.
So you got the whole plaza, all that parking, I mean, there's
Yeah,
a
you
ton of
got-
surface parking in that.
You got ocean. I tell you, I did Frisco Bridges, it's, golly, I can't remember how many acres now. But it was 1 million square feet. The city made me put 7,000 parking spaces out there to meet a code. I've probably got 30% of them don't have an oil spot on them. So what you're gonna find is, I think there's gonna be all kinds of opportunity within the town center itself. And yeah, it takes a little walk, but you know, it took a little walk at EDS when the great performance venue was there. You parked at EDS in the office buildings, you walked, 300 yards. So, yes, ma'am.
Well, I like the parking that you did. I really appreciate having pedestrian-friendly areas. I was wondering if there's a plan for bike racks for people who are.
Absolutely, every one of the nodes would have bike racks, every one. Yes, sir.
I got a couple of questions. One of the things that I don't know, I'm just throwing things out, it's just a lot of big open space. And I can appreciate that, I mean, from like a perspective of kind of relaxing, like you said, but I'm thinking like, just about myself, with little kids going out there, like, it's gonna be hot, no shade, those huge, those are like 2 acre big open spaces. I'm trying to think of like, what's gonna happen.
So the amphitheater is like 1.5 acres total.
I mean, what is the plan? I mean, throw a frisbee pin out there in the middle and kick football around, or?
Yeah, the mindset was just open play, whether it's kite or just wanted to kick ball out or take your kid out with a little tee and hit some wiffle balls or something.
Is there even?
McKenna is within a 5-minute walk or a 10-minute walk,
Yep.
but the topography in McKenna is like this. So there's really not a lot of flat space in that park to do that type of thing. There's a little bit, but not a lot. It's a lot of terrain.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I just thought of like bike racks would be great. I even thought like swing with benches. Like,
Oh,
just
well,
laying all the
this
sidewalk.
doesn't represent the
Okay,
business,
so
we
there's-
just didn't model all of it. I mean, that
But
might-
there will be seating all.
That's a
around.
40 meg file, I just couldn't keep modeling, but that does not represent.
Okay.
I mean, I would, if I had to count right now, I'd say there'd probably be 80 benches.
Okay, good, yes, I just didn't see it, so that's the question. And I even thought like over there, up against these berms,
You mean along the walk?
to the right, over here.
Oh, yeah, there?
Almost like a way to utilize that, any stage or something like that, somewhere,
See,
I'm trying to think in my head of just, because if I've got a park over here, I don't know, I'm never gonna make it down here.
Well, here's
I
how,
don't know, I mean, it's like,
here's how I envision it, it's kind of like the park kind of gets, those areas that are about 2 acres, they get divided up.
yeah,
One activity is gonna kind of commandeer part of it, if everybody's throwing frisbees or whatever.
yeah.
If you got people playing flag football or touch football or whatever, just throwing football around, they're gonna take a little piece of it. I just see it needing to be flexed, where it can flex with whatever activity really wants to happen at any given time, rather than divide it up into hard components. But I think the bench issue, I think you'll be real comfortable with what we've got. We are anticipating the bike racks at every node, so
What do you consider a node? I'm sorry.
any entrance point, crossroad,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry, David, we can't hear you.
I was asking what the definition of a node is.
A
You
node.
was referring to a node, I was saying, what is the definition?
So Mike, there's 3 nodes on the north-south spine,
Yeah.
one on each side, one in the center, that's a node. The lens would be a node. The intersection there would be a node, the outer board side would be a node, the corner would be a node.
Okay.
And at landing points. So kind of as you enter from wherever you enter, and I would think there would have to be that down by the ice house and by mud. People are gonna, they're gonna ride over there, do their deal. Yes, sir.
Do you have a spot where you envision concessions, that there was a,
Well, I was gonna use that, the ice house and the mutts to be the concession, so the city didn't have to maintain anything.
well, you know, if it's a public park, we don't wanna make it so it's only available to those two businesses.
Okay, well, I just didn't know, we never talked about that. you
I
know.
mean, that seems unfair. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, so there's no way to bring in outside concessions anywhere?
Well, I think in any event, you're gonna do that.
Well, and that's what,
Where would you park the trucks?
that's what Charles talked about, if you go up
Your
here,
service roads.
so.
To see the service drive that
Okay,
goes
up the
across.
top
Yeah,
left.
you have the
Right.
service drive here,
Uh-huh.
so the service drive is permeable pavement. So like we showed last time with that permeable pavement, you either put rock in it or you plant grass in it. So it looks like
Turf's
normal
on.
turf.
Mhm.
Grass comes up, you don't ruin the roots by driving over it, and then you can park your food trucks here, so then you can have different kind of concessions for different
See,
kind of.
my theory would be if I know there's a farmer's market initiative in other locations, but theory would be line all the farmer's market booths up on one side and every Saturday morning, or every first Saturday, we'd be out there doing that, and they'd be in the park side.
Right, I know a lot of our festivals too, it
We were-
overtaxes the existing dining areas
Yeah.
too, so we need extra. you
So
know.
see that, then you have the frame on both sides, so that's the whole point of that service spine. We can have our electrical in there, we can get our water outlets in there, gas if people want, yeah, I don't know if you're gonna allow gas cooking.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Back to the parking. You talked about parking, and thank you for that, parking on Crescent, handicap parking.
Well, handicap parking's gotta be a part of all the street parking. Everything's accessible out there. All of our crossings, everything's gotta be accessible. So we have to have that as part of any. The handicap parking is gonna be directly adjacent, is gonna be right there at that commercial development. Here, down in the, to the left, right in there. That's gonna be the closest that I think is the safest, cause it's got no crossings. So I'd like to have it on site, at no crossings where you don't have a cross street.
And regarding the history,
Yes, ma'am.
will the city didn't have, input? to
Oh,
what
yeah, the city, the
was
Historical
built?
Society is where we actually got the photographs that we used at Razor North. If you've seen all of those, the old stores in downtown on the square, the interior photographs, I use those as murals on those retail buildings on the north side facing 3A, because we wanted to celebrate that. They're really rich with photography and history.
Denton has a really rich history, we
Does.
just wanted it to be more inclusive.
Obviously. But there's some, there's wealth here. A lot of cities we work in really don't have that much, but y'all are wealthy with and whoever put all that historical society together did a great job. Yes, ma'am.
So, I really love Racer North, I'm like really proud of the landscape there, I think it was done well. And I love how the water in the parking lot, things go, and the waters, the trees. Is that also going to be?
Well, we did north, so,
Right.
we're gonna take our same philosophies for that.
So I guess what I'm trying to get to is, that's a really cool thing to share, you're talking about some of the education that you wanna do.
Sure.
And I think that could be incorporated in your landscape, like the way that it's been built and the sustainable landscaping and plants is just as important as the historical.
No question, and that's why, we've got multiple nodes, so we can tell different stories. You remember that root system?
Right, yeah, that was awesome.
So see, we could have that same in one of the nodes and just teach that.
And so, with that, I don't necessarily see that you have, there's open space for kids to play. Maybe you don't want a play structure, but have you all thought about putting in like natural play things, like giant boulders?
Well, I was gonna say, we had this discussion, I'm big on boulders, you ever been to Jackson Hole?
I haven't.
The city parks in Jackson Hole have climbing boulders, free climb, with grips. And my 6-year-old granddaughter and I climbed the boulders, it was wonderful. But I like natural, not man-made, so it might be a place, although there wasn't a lot of rock outcrops in the Grand Prairie. So you have to kind of fudge a little bit, but yes, natural playthings that are just simple It's just like a cardboard box. I say this all the time. You get a cardboard box, 2 hours, he can have had the time of his life. Crayon cardboard box.
Well, I think if we had, like, maybe one of the sections was kind of like thought of as like the kids section, maybe more things to play on, maybe a little more shade.
I think
I
that's
know,
good.
like, our family will be utilizing this space a lot because we actually live on Linden Street.
Oh, good.
And, I really want it to be accessible to all the neighborhoods around there, like, we have McKenna Park, but it's not, this park is actually gonna be more accessible than McKenna, even though it's closer to our house.
Yeah, and with Panhandle kind of becoming our bike pathway.
And I mean, we're gonna be feeling the traffic, so I just wanna make sure that our family and the other families in our neighborhood are benefiting.
I think,
from our access.
yeah, I think the roller sculpture, things like that, I think that would be, we've got, you walk in a delicate line of historically correct versus manufactured, so we just have to work carefully. Couldn't drop Colorado River boulders in here and call it natural, it's not.
Well, I mean, I guess there's also a fine line of a plastic ice skate versus bringing Colorado boulders, like, it would be better for Colorado.
Oh, no question, no question.
So.
I agree, I think it's a great idea,
And
have a
my
little node.
15-year-old,
Your 15-year-old.
she is very concerned that, there's no water anywhere, no water feature at all. Is that something that's been thought of?
You know, we designed for the largest developer in the world, Simon, who's taking the fountains out everywhere because of the microbial problem. There's a real problem with creating water now, particularly in the hot climate. And I've done a lot of water all over Texas. I would prefer we don't, honestly. I mean, in Georgetown, I took big blocks of limestone and had bubblers in it. And because I wanted the kids, I mean, little kids to come up and splash their hands in it, and take them out, health problem. So you can't control microbial growth in those fountains, therefore they cannot be accessible to the public.
They have a water filtration system?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we had pool pumps, the whole deal, but they said it's the problem is temperature, bacteria, and they're also worried about intent, people with bad intent. So I would tell you, I'd like for this one to feel more like the native prairie, and so having the water feature maybe is not there. Yes, sir.
Hi, I have 2 questions. The first one is there still the plan to have the 200 parking spaces in the other side of the land? The 3.86 acres labeled P1?
Man, you're gonna have to show me.
Yeah.
I'm not that good.
This area right here is
Yes.
still,
Yes,
Happening.
that is the actual plan.
okay, cool. So those butt up right to where
Right
the west end.
That's why I was saying that's the most convenient and I think the safest handicap.
Right. I was not listening to Francis's point. So to the left of,
Right
or is
there.
it north? I'm sorry.
It is north.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
It's just up a little bit.
Appreciate that. And then my second question is, with it being so many large open areas and 10 acres of land, maybe not a water feature, but water fountains, like
Oh, yeah.
having all that, okay, just making sure. Cool. I was like, that's a long walk.
In a public
Glass of
bathroom.
water, y'all.
That's a good point.
All the beer sales would go up.
Well.
Right?
So, I'm even thinking like, man, I'm just trying to think of such a large space, like,
Well, that's why we divided it
I'm
up.
thinking like, bocce ball pits, horseshoes, something that's just like, some disc golf cages.
I don't know, it feels comparable to Kyle Warren Park in Dallas, is it about the same space?
It's
I
a
mean,
little smaller, I think.
Smaller, I mean, but it's a lot of there's a lot of wide open spaces there, and it's always filled up with people. I know they got a lot more people in Dallas, but. Yeah.
It's the same principle.
Right, yeah, yeah,
Something
okay.
that's like, just driving like activity, I mean, I love open spaces, and I mean, I get it, you know, but I'm just trying to think like, I don't know, it's something, it's hot, and what are you gonna do? I'm just imagining July.
Go to the water park.
Today, right? Today, yeah, if I'm out there in July, like, I just, I don't know, I think we're gonna kinda like hang out where all the trees are.
Hang out at the water park at the lake.
Hopefully you'll have your look through and be up on the berm.
Yeah.
Under where the trees where the breeze is good.
Keep
Yeah.
pushing those
You gotta
coolers
shade
on
the
us.
breeze.
Then give it to the county if you want us to drink.
I'm sorry.
I said you need to give it to the county if you want us to be able to drink there.
I
That's the magic. I just don't know about all this irrigation, because you know, the places that we have with good sidewalks and stuff, like, people just don't venture into the grass all that often. I don't know if we need to water it enough to keep it looking good.
I mean, irrigation is, I think, a prereq from the department.
Because you definitely have to have it on the berms, keep those trees alive, and all the, you know, landscaping. But we have a lot of grass that we don't irrigate.
That's really for Drew and.
Well, at least have it zoned so we can turn it off.
Oh, it's,
Yeah.
you,
Oh.
you got it, it is on.
What happens on the amphitheater when it's not used?
It's just the one, it's just the foundation.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, it's a campus soccer game.
Well, those grades, those are 1 foot topos, so, I mean, from the distance, it's not, you can still go out there and play. It's not like this, it's
Oh,
1
no.
foot, I don't know what the distance was.
It's pretty subtle. I mean,
It's like what,
it's basically the way that Starplex was when it was at EES. And everybody go out there for the, I'm dating myself.
It's all right.
Yeah, I won't tell you who I went to see there all the time, but you just carried your picnic basket out there and you just sat with your picnic basket and watched the live music, and it was wonderful. It's not the only pitch is actually berms. They're the only, you know, harsh slope. They're at a 4-to-1 on the mobile side. That's why we do grass on the inside, because it's a 4-to-1 more subtle slope, but it's kind of like stadium golf.
And so the little stage concrete area, that will be run by parks?
Yeah, if we had a concert or someone wanted to rent it for a concert, they could bring in a stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would the cost be like?
We haven't even gotten that far yet, yeah.
We just set it up so it was infinitely adaptable to that. So you've got electrical there, you've got water there.
Sounds like it'd be a really good revenue stream.
So,
But it's basically just a pad, right? I mean, it's not raised or anything.
Whatever you
No.
just throw it in.
Have you ever thought about bringing electricity to it so you don't have to run generators during concerts?
Well, you can sub-meter electrical drops, but most of the shows want their own gen power.
yeah.
That's just.
Drew, you wanna talk a little bit about the maintenance?
Yeah,
Sounds pretty, I just love it all.
Yeah, how come we just give them the power? We don't even want all this stuff.
That's really up to y'all.
We don't have solar sidewalks yet. You know.
Yeah.
One day soon, maybe, right? Solar parking lots.
What is the maintenance on these hills like?
Drew's
Well,
gonna
it's
tell.
mobile on the inside, but it's all mobile.
Drew's gonna talk about
Right
it.
on and stuff?
Yeah, Ben, Drew's talking about it.
Drew's got kind of.
yeah. So we did a breakdown analysis of what we thought the park would cost once it was, you know, completed and handed over to us. And so with that, we have, several different, categories. First category being landscape, tree, and turf maintenance. As far as turf maintenance, that goes for, you know, no matter if it's irrigated turf or not, you still have to aerate it. As much foot traffic will be on top of it. You know, it's gonna pack the soil a lot, and the soil's completely packed, then the grass isn't gonna grow, so you have to aerate it. You have to fertilize it, of course, and we're going to more of, fertilizing, we'll probably go with the dino soil. We'll do the top dressing of dino soil that we have out here at the plant, so. And of course, backfill certain areas, so things will get eroded from, you know, kids digging and dogs digging and, a lot of foot traffic back and forth and just miscellaneous items. And it also has to include tree, you know, your tree maintenance and your landscape maintenance. Another thing is park inspections. So we inspect all our parks, and this one, we said right now we inspect it fully, you know, twice a week. Also includes your mowing, which this would be a bee cycle, so, or bee mowing, which I know we talked about that a while back, so it would be mowed 32 times a year. And then, your litter control, that's every week, 52 cycles. Your pet stations, so we have pet stations, of course, with liners, that's a cost. Your electrical maintenance and repairs, just your yearly cost of what it costs to make sure that, you know, the lights stay lit and everything stays running, whether, you know, we have to always, you know, figure in if, you know, you have hailstorms or anything else that comes in and damages we're not insured where we can call State Farm and say, hey, I'll pay my $500 deductible, that we're self-insured, so we cover all that stuff. So also irrigation maintenance and repairs, all that gets inspected yearly, monthly, and, there's certain repairs that have to happen with irrigation along with anything that's mechanical. Construction repairs, so that, as far as benches, concrete, all that money still has to be there and it recurs, year after year, stuff gets old, so you have to fix it. Then we scheduled in 4 events a year, so every time we do an event, whether it be, the Blues Fest, Arts and Jazz, all the other events that we go through, that we have throughout town, that's a cost for park maintenance because that's employee cost on the ground for their control while we're there, whether it be parking control, anything and everything needed, for electrical, water, and whatnot for all those events. So, there's a cost there with employees on the ground plus it costs park maintenance to take, litter to the ground, so. Also for, water and irrigation, so with all that, it's total of $73,000 a year. So it will go up for events, but like I said, whenever we do have events, this is events that we would put on, so it would be no charge, but if, you wanted to put on, if Charles wanted to put on the lap band, I would tell him, okay, it costs this much to rent the park, and $3,000 of that would be for park maintenance staff, or actually a little less than $3,000 would be park staff, to be able to rent the park and for us to have to go out there, make sure we're on the ground, picking up the litter. I'm sure you see it, Arts and Jazz and Blues Fest, that, we're there making sure everything stays clean, because if you're there making sure it gets picked up as you go, it's not near as bad the following day, so. So you have any questions on that?
How does that compare to other, that's such a broad question, but like.
I can answer that question. I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, how does it compare to our other parks?
Just to give you a standard, we were working on a budget for another project, and the NRPA standard for an average maintenance per acre is $6,857. That sound right to you? For an acre, average maintenance size in a city our size.
How much was that again?
Right now, we're at 7,500 here. Now, granted, that's an estimate, so that number he just told you is a draft. And I think there was $18,000 for water. We're not sure, that's a guesstimate. There were 4 events at $12,000 for staff expenses. We may not have any events, and maybe all private events, so that wouldn't be a direct charge to us. And then maintenance on the lights, that's all give or take. You could have 1 year where you don't have anything, you could have 1 year where you have to replace ballasts and all the lights, that's just hit or miss. So right now, that's our best guesstimate. And we're working, and with Glenn to develop maintenance standards similar to what NRPA had of the 6,500 change, cost per acre is kind of a rule of thumb. So we're trying to develop an internal scenario so we can have a formula that we use. That's a helpful formula, but if we can back ourselves into that number, so when we do estimates like this, we can say, okay, for a 1 acre standard park, it's gonna be X number of dollars for water, X number of dollars for maintenance, litter pickup, that type of thing. So we have kind of like a little formula that we can plug into, and it'll spit a number out to us. So we're working on that as part of our park standards during our master plan process.
Question about trash, I'm sorry.
Oh, you go first.
Do we have permanent trash structures or in the park?
Yeah, I don't think he's not showing all the details in there yet. I mean, it's just a concept to kind of get everybody feeling like we're heading in the right direction. And then we can start diving into where the benches are going, if we want shade. I wrote down everybody's comments here that we could work with Charles and Kevin on to where all those things are gonna go.
I think generally and conceptually, I love it. I think it's a neat idea. It's different than anything else around.
In the inventory, yeah.
Gary?
I was curious about the lighting. Are we talking solar? Like we talked about that one at South Lake in that parking lot?
Yeah, I've got solar going on the crosswalk right
Okay,
now. I
good.
did not put that lighting down the Esplanade because I, didn't really want to have that sea of post. But I put the solar that I guess Jason or Drew found. He said, "Oh yeah, that's the same ones you're using."
Okay.
They're cool pictures. Kelly, so,
Is there, and I'll just ask, I don't know, this may not be expanding again, maybe, but is there any, so just hung up on parking? So like where the trees are, right there, on the bottom and the top, the two mirror, keep going to the right, right there, that section,
mhm.
is there any reason we couldn't put parking there and move the trees in?
It's gonna scare me to death to have kids playing next to parallel park cars.
I mean, I'm not even thinking parallel park,
Oh.
I'm thinking,
Almost all of parks have
City
parking
might
lots.
let you have straight off-street parking.
Yeah, I mean, neighborhood parks, typically don't require parking lots. Milam Park is a good example. You know, neighborhood, we do have neighborhood parks that have parking lots, by all means, don't get me wrong. But, you know, Owsley doesn't have a parking lot. So this is a larger neighborhood
that's what
park.
I'm saying, I mean, so big in that sense.
Well,
There's a lot of concrete within
No, and
a
that's
few
my
blocks.
struggle, but I'm just trying to think of, how do you balance it out? Do you give a little bit of the space for parking there to get people there? Or do you leave it as it is, because there is a lot of concrete, but I just struggle still with just like, I'm thinking of my family, I just don't know, how am I gonna, like, if you wanna utilize that space more, I see this exception that's to the left there,
There's
the
parallel
parking
parking
lot.
on the opposite side.
Yeah, all of that is parallel.
But you're talking about 10 spots?
But
Oh,
it,
no, there's more
No,
than that,
it's
it
a lot
continues
longer, it's a
on.
lot longer than you're actually.
How many spots would that little section be right over there, right, keep going, right there, how many spots is that?
I'd say that's 6 or 7 there.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, you got 6 spots.
I mean, there's probably 45 spots on East Park Boulevard.
And plus all the spots here.
I think,
That's a long run.
So
thing.
So Ken, if you think about it, and I know you've driven Bonnie Gray, and it's hard for us to sit in these meetings also and look at the picture
Right.
and visualize, you know, what's gonna go there. And so I've gone out there, and Gary and I's gone, you know, we've gone out there to look at it. And so if you really think about it, go to Albertsons, right? Line yourself about, you know, where that shopping center is with Albertsons, and think of about half a football field or so, right? And that's about where the park's gonna start.
Yeah, back up.
Drive all the way down Bonnie Gray, about a football
Right there.
field away from the, gas well, and that's where it's gonna end. So, it's a really big difference if you really think about it. I mean, it's.
Yeah, it's
a
pretty, I mean,
distance.
now you've got the apartments on the west side to use that.
Can you point to the gas well?
Gas well's right up.
All the way up.
top right.
Farther.
Keep going up,
Left, upper left,
Right.
no, down here.
Another left.
Well side's right here.
Yeah.
My trailer's sitting right there right now. And the end of the park is here. If you go out and you look at those multifamily buildings that are built now, and we're right up here with the construction about to pave this section of Heritage Trail. So you can see how long that is. It is a long way.
So if you drive, you can actually go in behind Winco,
Right.
and you can see them. So
Yeah.
if you go all the way down to the road ends, and you have to take a right, either go in the back of Andy V's or go to the convention center, and then turn around and drive back to Winco, and you can kind of understand how
Yeah,
long
space.
the park is and how
We
big
make
it's
that
gonna
place
be.
up, and not just to take the point, for somebody that's driving in, I struggle with accessibility.
well, I think one other point of it too is that the gate that's on the south end is such a neat feature, but nobody that's coming from outside of that area will ever see it.
You talking about this gate right here?
Yeah, where would you park and walk that space?
You have Andy V's and the conference center and everything else on the west side.
Remember, there's also parallel parking down this side
I guess so.
of East Park.
All right, I can see
It
that.
goes all the way down there.
That's
so.
all public, everybody.
Yeah, it's all cross, like Kevin said, it's all cross utilization parking, so even though it is the conference center, you can park there and walk over to the park. Or
So-
even though Andy B's, it's not like Andy B's is out there scanning to make sure you're in there spending money.
Not
I
yet.
think Haley can also tell you, we'd have to do a slip road cutting into the park. Then the parking spaces, it would eat the heck out of that area. It's just not worth it for the few spaces you get, honestly.
To add to concrete.
Yeah, Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how to. I agree, I'm just what to.
You know,
Ride your bike, Kent.
you know, Ken's main point though to it is maybe it gets more people moving around in that area. You know,
So, yeah, so think about,
I don't know.
there's 2,000 people, 2,000 units right here.
Well, that's another thing, is if you look at 338 units times two, people have 2 cars per household usually, that's 676 cars, you have 594 spaces, so that leaves an access need of 82. So you're also going to be people who live in that area now, with all those different housing structures. I'm just concerned still with parking, but I do agree it shouldn't be on the play area.
I will tell you my philosophy, if one of our residents gets in their car and drives to that park, we will fail. One of our residents. Because it's the centerpiece. It should be the walkable connector of all of them.
Keep in mind that neighborhood parks aren't necessarily designed as destination spaces. Now, that's not saying this isn't a destination space, maybe at certain times, you know, where you have a couple of times where you're gonna come here for, maybe there's some sort of event. But
Lime scooters.
For events, I'm not sure for events why, I mean, we've got this ocean of parking ultimately at the town center. For events, we ought to be able to park at the hotel and park other places and shuttle. I mean, if they have, I think there's gonna be.
I mean, you can walk that, that's, I don't even think you need a shuttle or something like that, as long as that's accessible and cross parking. If it's all cross parking and that's enforceable, and it's cross parking, then I think.
I think it's gonna be, I don't wanna make the mistake I made at Frisco.
Will there be, a bus drop off near there?
We're working, we started working 5 years ago, Kevin, with DCTA to see if we couldn't bring a loop through a Panhandle into the town center and back out again. I don't think that, we haven't concluded that yet.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
There's one over
it's
by,
across from Memphis.
Chinese
It's across from
buffet
Memphis,
right
yeah.
now.
I think,
Within my next question, would there be a place, I know you have that one road between the ice house and the stage, but is there like a loading area where people,
that whole
if they have a
area,
bunch of kids, they could like drop off all their stuff and maybe one parent or one person and then go?
well, we were gonna make that service vehicle only, but we could probably, I don't know, we might bar it or do some gates that are operable. Down there, just a pipe gate where people could pull in, unload the strollers and the baskets and all that, and then go do their deal. It's just,
You'd have to make it cross, you'd have to stripe it across for.
I'm not sure why I go there,
That way,
unless I was
cars
trying to
stay
get to
there.
Winco and it was
it's
in
really
my
a loading, unloading space.
honestly.
That might just help with some of the.
I'd go there, I'd ride my bike over there.
Could the Parks Department or the.
We got big room. I'm looking forward for like
look
Denton
at
or Panhandle to come through, just ride my
contingency,
bike to be in and out
like,
and stuff, you know?
What if we could do
I
this?
don't wanna ride down University.
Residents move in, and we get there, it's like, you can't find parking anywhere. I mean, what if that happened? I mean, I'm just trying to think, so like, is there a way to draw a contingency plan to say like, what then, where do we, what could we do differently, you know, like, adjust the plan accordingly to provide more parking or something?
I mean,
Just
I
trying to
guess-
think of, like,
we can look at modification.
yeah, some things that you can modify, to say, like, at some point, if you got a 10-acre tract of land that nobody's using, and it's because it's not accessible
Yeah.
by people, then.
The good thing about, like what Charles said earlier, is we're moving, we're adding that 10 feet between the sidewalk and the berm. So it absolutely had to have, then we could readjust the sidewalk, put it closer to the berm, and then that gives you that 10-foot wide parking space. Which parking spaces only have to be 8-foot wide.
So that's for parallel parking. So if we have to, which do you want to, like that?
That could be the contingency.
The other thing to think about is, you know, I guess all of our parks either have dedicated parking or they're in areas where there's not mass gatherings of people except downtown.
Yeah.
Okay, so Quakertown is a good example of that. You come down here for arts and jazz, you're not parking right at the Civic Center as you do today. You're parking a couple blocks away. You know, I have no idea what the number is, but there's gotta be a couple thousand parking spaces within a 10-minute walk, which is NRPA standard of every resident to every park.
And there's probably
Yeah,
no
so-
parking spaces there.
You know, our town's more accountable
Everybody
parking.
for
It's gotta be way more than 2,000.
There's 791 for the Alamo Draft House right now.
790,
That's a little 90 parking spots?
just for Alamo.
So
It's
I
over,
think,
that's over parked.
if we want to get everybody that comes to that park to park adjacent to the park, we're not going to accomplish that.
Fair enough.
What we do need to do is get people in the habit of walking, yeah, instead of pulling up their pickup truck right next to it and discussing gas.
Fair enough. Alright, alright.
So Gary, what do you need from us?
Oh, we'd like a recommendation that we're heading down the right path. We're gonna try to get the council maybe in February or March. We're trying to get an agreement, finalized with the city attorney's office that we can take to council and have a similar discussion with city council in regards to the design of the park, and the process and all that. We're still working through some of those details, but we wanna make sure we're heading down the right path.
And so this conversation will include all of the lists that you've compiled based on our comments, including the contingency plan.
Yeah, I've written down, I think I had everything, and we'll make sure we get it in the minutes, so you guys can see that, and I can't guarantee that we'll be able to do everything, but we'll have a discussion, yes.
Another aspect on parking is it's going to the park as an event. If you're going to drive, I'm assuming there's multiple occupants per car. It's not like one person.
No, that's the deal. I mean, I bet you that the parking in town center alone is over 4,000 spaces
So
before it's all built out. So
even
I
though
just-
you have 10
I've
parking
done
spaces,
this.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Don't worry about
I mean, I think it's fine.
Fair enough.
Might need signs to point the handicap people where to park though.
Exactly.
It's kind of not real
And
obvious.
that's publicly accessible, so Steve, we're
handicap
right there.
access again here with access between, is that right?
Yeah.
So is there some ratio we know of that on a park space that you get 2.5 occupants
No.
per car?
No, I don't think you can. I've never seen it.
So, 10 parking spaces turns into 30 people coming
Yeah.
to the park.
Well, I appreciate everybody's time and consideration. Thank you. I know it's a real complex deal to go through. Sometimes I go off on the tangents, but this is really an opportunity to do something great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's a neat project.
I have one more idea. So, we're talking like prairie and these, drought resistant grasses with deep roots. We have like a wildflower thing at North Lakes Park, which is a no-mow zone. I'm just not convinced all that green spaces, without a reason to walk out into it is needed. Can we just have like a little sample of prairie up there that we just let go tall and?
There was
If
some
it's
It's
around
really
the
up to these guys. I mean, I'd love it, but
Could have to be a no-mow zone though. I mean,
But I thought you recommended that.
Isn't that around the berms?
what's on the
all the
perimeter?
berms are native grass.
Yeah.
But like an actual prairie area.
Flower Mound did it on the mound, and nobody ever goes. It's a shame. I think they have one event there a year, and it's a shame. I think here we have basically pressed the sidewalks up against the berms, and they're gonna be educated because we're gonna identify each species of grass there. So I kinda think we're doing that in even a much more bold way, than just doing a little plot. But I hear you.
I don't let my dad mow his lawn because he just mows over all the blue stem. So I do it for him. Circles around it.
Okay, so any additional discussion? You need a motion from us to proceed, a recommendation to proceed, Gary?
We'd like some support, yeah, that would be great.
I'll make that recommendation to,
There's a motion.
I would motion to, proceed with the plans as proposed with our suggestions in mind.
Second,
I'll second the motion.
all right.
We can provide updates as we go to, so, via email. I don't know if we can do every meeting, if we're gonna go to that much detail. We can definitely provide updates as we go and identify some of the changes.
I'd like to clarify it though, just before we vote on it, that with the suggestions, but I don't think the suggestions were all necessarily unanimous from the body. I think there were discussion points to be brought forward.
Right.
So I don't think we say it's recommended with these suggestions.
Yeah,
I think-
I was trying to,
With those,
I was trying to think,
Right.
he obviously has already done that, I don't know how to make that.
I'm not trying to get too into the weeds, but I don't want them to think that that was what came out, we gotta have this and this and this.
So what you see in general is kind of the core of
Great
it,
job.
and we'll look at some of the, like the handicap parking, identifications, water fountains, bus drop off. There's one right in front of Albertsons that's pretty close. Boulders, native plants we're doing, integration with the historical society, make sure we're bringing them into it officially. So some of those things we have listed here.
As long as they're included as part of the discussion, I think is what.
Yeah, I think that was the idea, not taking into consideration. That's
Do we also need to include the public art committee?
Yeah.
public art committee.
Yeah.
Yes, they would. We've had some discussions about some of the other projects, so after this, we'll circle back around with them and get this on their radar.
We need to vote.
Yeah, my only concern is that the art is inclusive. Okay,
Vote.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Motion passes.
Thank you so much for your time, appreciate it.
Next item. Receive information regarding funding process.
Parks master plan?
Parks Master.
Okay, so we will leave.
PowerPoint for them if they want to put through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gary, it's.
we'll grab that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Over the past, I guess 8 months since I've been here, we've talked a lot about the master planning process that we're getting into. And officially, we've been telling everybody January, well, January's here. So, we are kind of officially getting, on the roll there. We've been working on it probably for the past 2 months, internally with various things, more or less data gathering, and researching and inventorying everything we have to make sure what we do have in inventory is correct and accurate. So I just wanted to give you a quick summary of the process, and Glenn jump in as well. Right now, we met last week with our survey company, the same company that did our needs assessment analysis in 2008, 2009. So we're going through that survey questionnaire. Back then, it was done via telephone. A lot of people don't have home telephones anymore, so that process has changed a little bit since in the past 10 years. So it will be an online survey that we send postcards to people, and they can go online with a code and put their code in and take the survey. For those that don't have access, they'll be able to access it at a senior center or one of our libraries, as well as they can call a number on the postcard, and we'll mail them a survey. So that way everybody has that accessibility. In addition to the people that are on the mailing list, which will be using our water addresses, we'll also be reaching out to people in focus groups and special interest groups like yourselves to take that survey as well. So that way we can get a clear dissection of every different group and then the general public as well. So we're looking to possibly mail that out in February. We're hoping to get the survey completed next week so we can take it with us to the State of the City event, and we'll have people start filling them out then, just kind of as like our kickoff. And also, if there's any issues that come up during the survey, we might be able to make some modifications, kind of a little dry run too. So that's going on there. Typically, and what we did in 2008 was hired Jacobs Group to do the entire master plan. We're doing this in-house to save on that money. So it's a big task, and it's going to take us all of 10 to 12 months to do. We hope to have it approved by City Council by December. Bring it to you guys probably in November. But instead of hiring a firm, we're taking a little bit of a different, unique approach where we're going to engage with some private and public and association type groups. They're going to come in and evaluate us in different aspects where they have specialty at. So for instance, we're looking at a playground company that specializes in playground development, inclusive play structures, that type of thing. A rec center firm that develops rec centers to come and look at what we need from a rec center standpoint. From our urban forestry, we're actually doing an urban forest master plan that was budgeted last year and then followed over into this year. We're going to take that and incorporate it into our master plan. So we have a number of firms, about 10 or so, that we're going to work with. TAF, our State Athletic Association is gonna evaluate our athletic program. So we're doing that, so we get these subject matter experts to look at what we do and give us a 2 or 3 page synopsis with some recommendations, long-term and short-term. And then here's kind of the state of the park system type thing. So we're in the process of getting all those people lined up. And then we're also gonna be planning our public meetings and then also our special interest focus group meetings as well for the course of the next probably 2 months.
Question about the public meetings, will there also be copies, hard copies of the survey at the public meetings, so they can complete them at the meeting?
We will have hard copies. We're also gonna make it so you could come up with your phone and you could either put in an address or scan a QR code and it takes you to the survey and you can do it on your phone. That way we don't have to take the surveys back and enter them into the computer. It automatically tabulates everything for us. And then truthfully, there's no way for anything to be skewed and we can't do anything to it because you're taking it right there. But we would be there to basically walk them through that process. Yep. So that's kind of where we're at right now in regards to the master plan, what we're going to be doing for the next 2 months or so, 2 or 3 months. We'll be coming back to you this month. We hope to finalize the entire outline for the entire 12 months, what Glenn's working on feverishly. And our goal is to come back to you every month with a little bit of a snapshot of kind of where we're at as we progress down that timeline. I talked to Francis and Gary a couple weeks ago about how that process would work. Some organizations will put together a steering committee, which is made up of people from all over the city in different groups. And then some people just use the park board as their kind of steering committee. Good and bad, both ways. The steering committee, you get more of a snapshot from different interests. But that's a lot more challenging, dealing with keeping everybody up to speed. I think this group would be great. The steering committee people that I kind of started to list out would be focus group people anyways. So we're gonna make sure we cover those regardless. So that way we'll just come back to you every month and give you a drip of entire progress of how things are going throughout the planning process. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add 2 things just so everybody gets in the mindset. What is a master plan? We can all be thinking that way. And expand on the methodology that Gary was just talking about. So I could talk for days or write thousands of pages about what a master plan is, but I'm going to sum up in 1 sentence this time just to get us started. But please digest each word of the sentence, and it'll help you have a firm grasp of what a master plan is. Okay, a master plan is the development of complex, comprehensive framework for orderly, consistent planning, acquisition, development, and maintenance of parks and recreation, resources, programming, and facilities. So if you can digest that 1 sentence, you understand the complete master plan.
I tried to turn that into a snappy acronym, it didn't work.
I didn't hear that. I was like, that's 14 words. Shift back in my brain space.
The other part I'd like to expand on is the methodology. We're going to have 6 phases, and we need to complete these phases in order to end up with a very usable, functional master plan. Data collection, and Gary expanded on all these topics. Data collection, collaboration, needs assessment and identification, and then recommendations. So these first 3 that we're talking about are going to take the majority of our 10-month period. It won't take as long to do the recommendations because we're comparing the standards, we're collaborating with different groups, we're finding out what we have. Then, towards the end, we come to the different groups for approval, park board, city council, and at the very end, we implement our plan. So there's 6 phases that will go through this master plan. And we'll go more into depth on each of those as the months come by, because we could talk forever about each one, but basically that's the phases
want me to get matching tattoos on my
Just add one, add one more thing.
Everybody gets a word.
Yeah, you can go around the room. Makes sense.
I want to be framework, that's all.
I mentioned during that presentation about the NRPA standards and the 6,500 average cost per acre for maintenance. NRPA is kind of in the process of changing some of their standards. They have, I guess, what we're calling traditional standards and then some new standards. And we're really going to be using a combination of both, because we can measure the best we can against other cities and like cities, but there's always going to be apples and oranges, and there's always going to be Macintoshes and Gray Smiths, you know, and we are what we are, but the best thing we can do is look at things around us and try to get some comparables and then make the best decision from that information. So the newest thing that's out right now is a combination of the Trust for Public Land and NRPA, where they're trying to institute a 10-minute walk from every resident across the United States. That's a huge task. In there's a few cities that do it 100%, but they're very dense, urban areas. Right now we're at 40%. The national average is 54%. So we're well behind the national average from accessibility. So
Might be lower.
it could be lower, but there's opportunities for it in both directions. But Eddie and I met with members of TPL a couple weeks ago, and we're going to meet again next week to figure out how we can improve that philosophy. And there's ways we can enhance that by cooperative agreements with the schools, where we utilize their play spaces. They typically do not like general public using their parks because they like to protect the kids in the school and all that for safety reasons, which makes sense. But we could have cooperative agreements where we have quote-unquote public access after hours. So those are one of the things we can look at. We can look at underutilized city property that's not being used well. We can look at utility corridors, that type of thing. So there's ways to move that needle instead of just kind of buying your way out of it by buying land. Obviously, we can't afford that. But what we can do is look at those options where we can find partnerships to enhance that accessibility, and then overlay that to where we do have red spaces that are on the maps, where if we do look for property that becomes available, we can use that as a measuring tool. So if you guys come in and say, hey, I saw this property up the street, it's 3 acres of property, it's up for sale for $200,000, if that's an area that we're very deficient in accessibility for all people, we could go after that type of property. As opposed to just pulling off and saying, hey, this property looks cool, but we have 3 parks around it. That may not be the wisest decision. So at least it gives us some geographic data that we can use in our calculator to make some decisions. So those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at during the master plan process, kind of behind the scenes.
I think it's a much needed thing, that it's a much needed organization that's missing.
Well, hopefully it gives us a great tool that we can say, you know, here's the TPL, and we can set out the link to the map. They have a website that they put together that was an initial kind of release that shows red spots in the city of Denton that are hot spots that need parkland bad. And then it shows where our parks are covering the city, and then it shows where park space is somewhat needed because the population isn't as dense. So obviously around the square is denser, and you can see a lot of red there. It's an interesting map. We'll have Andy send it out to you with an update, and it's a good visual opportunity, so you can see right off the bat where the parks are needed.
They do like a pocket park right off downtown, a beautiful design.
Pettiness of
Anyways, moving right along.
Will part of that be like the schedule of updating the older existing like playground parks?
So we already put together, this past summer, we put together a playground replacement plan that has all the playgrounds listed, when they were built, and over an average 10-year lifespan, when they would be replaced with an anticipated replacement cost. So we've laid that all out until 2030, I think. But that's the type of things we're grabbing and pulling into the master plan, so we can see what our capital maintenance needs are and our capital, improvements are going to be from both new and old.
Yeah, I know we made great strides this year, like catching up with 2014 bond, and is there still other capital projects out there that we're obligated?
We have a couple. We have 2 playgrounds. There was one that was scheduled for this year and one for next year. We moved some things around to pull that one from next year forward so we can get it done this year. So that is Nettie Schultz and
Marvin Luther King.
No, okay. It was Marvin.
I'm sorry, I was typing.
2 playgrounds.
Oh,
Nettie Schultz.
and Fred Moore.
Fred Moore. And then MLK and Quakertown are federal grants that we got for replacements of those. So there's 4 playgrounds we're replacing this year. The tennis center is a bond program. And the Southwest Park Master Plan is a bond program. That was pushed to next year.
Okay.
So we had the master plan done so we knew what our needs are, so we
Right.
could make an educated decision on what goes in there. And then we had land acquisition. We didn't have any land that we were interested in buying right now, so we pushed that to next year. So we have $1 million between us and the library to buy land. From a bricks and mortar thing, is that it?
Yeah, because we finished Sequoia. Bella will be finished late April, early May due to rain days.
I'll send you, from a specific bond list, we'll send you that list.
That'll all be in,
Yeah, we
I didn't
can
know where
get you
we-
kind of an update. I
Close
think our
enough.
next meeting is in February with the bond committee to give them a rundown. We're trying to get all the bond programs done as quickly as we can.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Next item. North Lakes Rec hours.
There was a question, I think last month, about the operational hours for North Lakes, and so Caroline Seward, who I believe y'all have met, she's our park area manager, who directly oversees our recreation centers, provided an agenda information sheet that just kind of explains the general office, or I'm sorry, not office hours, but operational hours for our rec centers. We recently actually just expanded the hours at our recreation centers because they were all open at different times. North Lakes was open longer than any of our other facilities, but they were all off by anywhere from an hour to about 30 minutes. So we said, okay, across the board, here's what we're going to do. And last year, we actually got some supplemental funding to increase the operational hours at those facilities, again, to make them consistent across the board. So what I asked her to do is to put together that information for you. We also conducted a survey just prior to expanding those hours, and expanded those hours based on the results that we got, on the feedback that we got from the users at that time. And then I thought it was in here too. Oh, I'm sorry, because I'm looking at the trails. There's also a monetary amount in there for expanding those hours later, or I'm sorry, opening earlier.
$27.99, $2,799.
Then we
I'm
did
looking at
4
the-
hours on Sunday, it was 22.48 that we received last year.
Yeah.
Oh, here.
Here, sorry, okay, it was on the back. Yeah, so for North Lake specifically, adding those additional 4 hours on a Sunday to be similar to some of our other operational hours would be the $2,700, just right under the just under $2,800. What we currently have though out there right now is we've got a rental of a church that uses it, and so the 4 hours was actually based on working around the rental, so that for the time being, we could honor the contract that we have with them. But there would also be, in addition to that, $2,800, which doesn't sound like a lot, it's not. What you see on the back end though is the loss of revenue
completely
Yeah.
worth it, I think. Completely worth it.
So.
Serious,
Yeah,
serious.
You think what's, I'm sorry, can you?
Having another day of these, everything open, that's what I want.
I live in North Denton, and I wanna get a rec membership. But I'm probably gonna go get a Planet Fitness, cause it's the same amount of money as the rec center, and it has a lot more equipment, and they're open on Sunday. And Sunday is about the only day that I can go utilize it because of my schedule. And I have a feeling I'm not the only one. When I see you shaking your, both of you shaking your head.
I use it all the time, and I have to drive to Fort Worth on Sundays to go to my office, to go work out.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's really
I'm with you.
unfortunate. I'd rather spend my money in parks department.
What time would you use it? In the morning or afternoon on Sundays?
On Sunday, well, it would depend. I mean,
Yeah.
it would depend on my family. Most likely it would be in the afternoon.
Right.
Sunday morning, we have
So the
stuff going on.
church rents the whole facility, or is it like just the gymnasium? Could you still open up the weight and bicycles and stuff?
With that kind of rental, we wouldn't recommend, yeah,
It'd be
having,
weird having
yeah,
all
having
the
some
sweaty people come
recreational
through, the
parking
church
while
people.
somebody's having.
Someone trying to get baptized, you're like,
Yeah.
Yeah. But I
So,
understand
we need to
the
give it a
revenue
Yeah.
part too, and so I guess, is there a way to work, like, if it was open in the afternoon, early evening? I don't
Like,
know
not
what
get in the way of that
time
rental?
but,
You mean open up afterwards?
Well, and yeah, that's what the 4 hours
Sure.
represents, is working around
Around it,
the
yeah.
rental.
So it would be like 2 to 6 or something like that, right?
maybe a
Yes.
small window, you know, it would be,
They're in the space from 9 AM to 1:30.
Till 1:30, yeah. So it would have to be open. Now, we do have a building attendant that works, during that time, that's available, and it is, kind of, it's just that, a building attendant during the rental, but that, a building attendant is covered by the revenue from the rental itself. So we're not having to supplement, the rental.
So the only cost for opening 4 extra hours on a Sunday is $27.99 per year, $2,799.
That's one person.
But that's one person.
That's like $13 an hour. We prefer to have 2 people
Yeah.
there just for safety purposes. So you can say roughly $8,000 or $6,000.
It'd be double the $2,800.
For a year.
For a
Yeah,
year.
for an entire year, yeah, on Sunday. That's my vote.
I mean,
Wow.
we might get that many more people sign up for memberships.
I don't think
if
we
they
should
can work out on Sunday.
worry about the price. Like, if things need to pay for themselves, we need to cancel the tennis complex and on and on and on. I mean, just open it up and get people access to it.
Yeah. I think it should.
I would bet probably the majority of the people that aren't using it in the mornings because they're probably doing church or family things in the morning. So, if there was a sweet spot on Sunday, it probably is the afternoon,
Right.
after lunch type thing.
I'll commit to going every Sunday from now on, I promise.
I will too.
The good news here is it will compromise the existing contract, did you say?
It wouldn't, because it would be outside of business
No.
hours.
If we just did it for 4 hours,
It would not.
yes, it would, those 4 hours are to accommodate the existing contract, yeah. Instead of opening all day, it would just be 4 hours on that day. And again, what we could definitely do is, so one of the things with all of our recreation centers, our programming and operational hours, the staffing for that are all in the rec fund, and we'll get to that in a minute when we talk about the different funding sources. On the rec fund side, all of our costs have to be 100% cost recovery. So, whether or not that means adding programs on a Sunday to help pay for that additional, because again, I know it doesn't sound like much, but for the rec center to now think, okay, I've got to cover an additional almost $6,000, how am I going to do that? Is it going to be through just simply trying to increase our memberships, or providing a program, a new program, or increasing the cost of existing programs? It has to be covered. This isn't something that's supplemented by general fund tax dollars. So that's the other caveat. And we've struggled with that, question about competing with some some of the bigger, fitness centers, and we simply can't. I mean, and that's really not what we're trying to do. We're not here to compete for them because it's not, we are just cost recovery. We're not a profit-making enterprise. We want to keep our costs down low so that those that can't afford Planet Fitness can come, yeah.
So I mean, that breaks down to something like,
It's
100
memberships.
well, I was gonna say, it breaks down to something like $125 a week that they would have to cost recover. And I'm sure that, a Zumba class probably brings in, a good portion of that.
Or a yoga class.
Yeah.
A birthday.
I mean, I can't imagine that would be a really insurmountable thing to.
But if one of the largest complaints we're hearing is people don't want to pay for a membership there because they're not open on a Sunday, and now they are, 50 one-year memberships pays for that entirely. I feel like that's a small number for such a giant space. Let's get this.
And
we have-
it was $115.
Could it be like a pilot, maybe just see
Right.
how it goes?
Well, one of the things that we are doing is we're actually including this as a question on our survey to see if there is a larger need, because that's really what we have to go off of, is what is the larger need for it? I mean, we know we have people that, yes, want it. Number one, are they gonna turn out? And number two, what is that percentage? So that's really what we have to look at. So we do, for right now, I mean, if we can use that direction, like I said, we have a question specifically on our survey about operating hours. Gary and I, like you said, we met with a consultant this past week to go over the survey that was used in 2008, see how we could update it, and also specifically include some of the topics and some of the questions that have come up more, recently that are relevant. And looking at what would we be looking for in a new facility, a new recreational facility, and how can we improve, or what are we looking for in the existing recreational facilities? And operational hours is one of the selections that you can make.
Thanks for the follow-up on that.
So why do they have to recover their cost? The rec centers? I mean, if that's a law,
It's not a
like,
law,
do we
it's
need ballot
actually,
initiative to change it? Looks like it's
this was an ordinance back in the, Gary, we've done some, back in the, I wanna say 70s, 80s originally, where a fee schedule was established. And, it's just part of helping with the operations of our Parks and Recreation Department, in that, if we are charging something, and again, just the philosophy of our industry and our field is to keep those costs low, because we want to be all-inclusive, and we want to have, give people the greatest opportunities to come in and participate in sports. If you can't, especially nowadays, I think selective sports is the biggest, is the best example. If you can't afford literally the $5,000 a year that it costs you to send your kid to a baseball or a volleyball selective sports or club, you still have the opportunity to go and play those sports at a rec center. Same thing for exercise classes, whether or not you've got, the ability to do a pickup game of basketball, or go to our fitness center, as limited as it is now. But just at one time, there was an ordinance that was established and said, look, if you're charging a fee, that needs to go towards offsetting the cost of the services that you provide. It's not 100% cost recovery when you take into account for operational charges, so like utilities, electric, water,
It's more program related.
It's all program related. Now, those utility costs, facility maintenance, that is subsidized by our taxpayer dollars. But the rest has to come from the program fees. That's part of our revenue stream.
But we could still plan on asking for a supplemental for some assistance to do that if council wants to evaluate those. Again, we're talking $6,000 isn't a bunch, but anything's helpful. So we can plan on putting that on our request list for next fiscal year in the meantime.
Okay. So right now, the plan is to get additional feedback before we do this.
Yes, this is included on our survey, our plan survey, yes.
Any additional questions, comments?
I would just throw the ordinance. I mean, ordinances are amended all the time.
Yeah. He said ordinances are amended all the time.
Oh, okay. All right, the next item,
Alcohol in parks.
let's talk about funding.
So this one was a follow-up, I think, I think Alana asked about our funding resources, so this is more or less just a inventory list for you guys to have. There's a bunch of other ones we didn't include in this that are things we don't use, but they could be utilized as an option at some point in time. But these are the more frequent flyers that we've either used in the past or are thinking about trying to use if we haven't. Just so you can get an idea when we roll out different terms and all that, you have an idea kind of, you start picking up on our jargon, I guess, and the reasoning behind some of those. Is there any questions on the list?
It's all pretty self-explanatory.
Will you read it to us?
One of the questions I've always had, I mean, I don't know, it's probably 2.5 years or so ago, I want to say DeLee, before Laura came on board, was working on compiling a map that showed where the 915, 916 funds were and where they can be used.
Yep.
And I don't know if that process is still going
So,
on. If,
about probably less than 2 months ago, we've been working on it since I've been here. We met with IT, and they've created a map that, so the 915-16 money is generated from every development. They pay fees for both land and development of parkland. So, and it's with a 1 mile or a half-mile radius, depending on 915 or 16, with that development. And so what we have to do is find out where each one of those developments are and see if they overlap a park to see if we can use that money in that park. And that's been very challenging over the years without some sort of mechanism to do that.
right.
So IT created a series of GIS map layers that we open up, and it has dots all over the city, and those dots represent developments. And you click on the dot, it'll tell you how much is in the account for 915, how much is in the account for 916. And around each park, there's a bubble, and that symbolizes the 1 mile radius from that perimeter. So now we can literally go and see, okay, we can add all the numbers up and see how much money's available. So when we're looking at playground or restrooms for Carl Jung, we can open that up now and go to Carl Jung and see that there's 4 developments within that area and how much money is available. So that's allowing us to start freeing up money to do some projects, and those are some of the things that we've been talking about over the past year. We've been doing it old school by basically taking out where that address is and drawing a line on Google Maps and figuring that out. Now we have more of a mechanism that cuts that time a lot quicker. And it keeps track of it, because every time we take something out of that file, it deducts it from the GIS layer. And we take it and we transfer it into a project account. That way it's committed, it's in that account. So we have a tracking, we can see where everything's at, and then we can put it back if we don't use it.
And is it only parks? I mean, could that money be used for public right-of-way, medians, and things like that if there is no park?
It's for park development and park acquisition. If there's no acquisition needed within a half mile, then it triggers back to a mile for the 950.
So it can only be used for the park, and that's for, for instance, like we found a lot of the money for 915, 916 to be developed industrial. So that's where all that money, we weren't asking for any money whatsoever. That money was coming from 915. The dog park one in North Lakes. All the money, we didn't have to ask for any of it. It was already there.
Right.
From the development and dedication fees. So that's where that money is.
And it can't be used for anything else. It can't be used for a fire station, it can't be used for a library.
Water, utilities, electric, and all that stuff.
And then adding to that, I think we may have talked about this, Laura hired Dr. Crompton, who's from Texas A&M. He's a professor. He's very well known in the Parks and Recreation world. Very fortunate to have him in Texas. He is going to do an update to our park land and development ordinance. Our ordinance was last modified in 1998, and it's a 1998 formula.
Oh, it's not, that's when it was, that's the
Approved.
original. Yeah,
Yeah.
it hasn't been updated
Yeah,
since.
so,
then. Yeah.
so basically we're working off a grocery bill from 1998, or a gas bill, however you want to figure that out, but it's not equivalent to today's values. So everything we're getting from development is 50 cents in the dollar, or what it should be. You know, I don't know what the final recommendation would be, but it's probably something of that.
30 cents to the dollar based upon the new NRPA standard.
Yeah, so we're not getting that value in our fees. So the longer we wait, the more development happens, the more we lose ground. So we want to get that updated as soon as possible. You know, the developers may not like that because now their bills are going to be probably twice as much, but that's probably what they should have been a long time ago.
They're probably all talking behind our backs going, man, they don't know what they're doing.
That's hurry up and get them going. So
They're quick, yeah.
They very rarely complain on how much they
Right.
have to pay.
It's a timetable.
So we're hoping to get this done. I think we've set a timeline of August for us to make sure it gets to council. There's a couple things we need to get cleaned up before we're working on park estimates in today's world. So we got 2 other municipalities from park development, a 8.5 acre park, which was $1 million, a little over $1 million. And then we got one from San Antonio, New Braunfels. New Braunfels, we got an example from them. So that's part of the process for us to get rolling. So we're gonna be engaging with him pretty soon to get that going. And you guys will be brought into that process.
You make it just like in order to avoid this again, like annual or biannual update or something like that.
I think there's an automatic trigger type thing.
Yeah.
Automatic renewals type thing. It's a percentage of something, some formula.
That'll allow us to keep the pricing updated rather
Yeah,
than
that's a
having
good
to go back every year, yeah.
Gary, I did have one question on that funding sources. There was a mention of a PID in there. Are there PIDs existing in the city of Denton today? Are they
There's-
doing any?
There is, I don't know if there's a PID or
I
not.
think we have
There's-
tips.
We have tips.
But not any pins.
I know there's discussion about a municipal maintenance district.
Because like with a PID, a lot of times the council will serve as that board, which gives it nice tight control.
Yeah.
And that's a good method as opposed to some of them, but I
Yeah.
just didn't know there were any like that.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any pits, but I think we have, well, downtown has a tip area, yeah.
Is there?
And I think there's discussion about a PID for the cultural district. Is there a PID? There's some discussion about, I think there's something floating around about a PID.
I was just curious.
If I catch up with it, I'll let you know.
I have a question. I had no idea we had the McKenna Trust Fund available. And I was just wondering, like how much is in that fund and if there's a plan for that fund to do anything with McKenna after I know you were waiting for the road to be changed.
There's, well, that's a good question, I'm glad you asked it. There's not a lot of money in there. I think it was somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 that we budgeted, and we've earmarked it for the playground whenever that gets rolling. I know there's been discussion about putting an inclusive structure there, but based on what we've been talking about tonight, the terrain there, that may not be the best location for it. So I've had a discussion with the Park Foundation because they were interested in doing some fundraising for that as well. And then council has asked for an update, and on the 15th, we're gonna give them a brief presentation about that. And we'll share that with you, just to have time to get it all together. But it started off with the roundabout that's going right there in the southwest corner of the park. And the house that the city purchased is gonna be torn down, supposedly. I don't know if that's been 100% finalized. And then the right-of-way of the old Bonnie Bray, which is quote-unquote our parking lot, will be cut off, so there won't be access from the new Bonnie Bray there. So we're giving council a couple options to leave the parking lot there and rebuild it as part of the Bonnie Bray project, and have the access off Scripture, or move the parking lot off Thomas, because there was some discussion, I guess, a year ago, 2 years ago, about it coming off Thomas, south of the water tower, or moving on the north side of the water tower, and moving the playground up on the north side, up away from the road. So, two of those options leaves the playground where it's at and replacing it. And then the other option is basically abandoning that location and moving it on the other side of the water tower. The least costly one is the parking lot where it's at, the playground where it's at. And then the next one would be parking lot off Thomas and leaving the playground where it's at. There's some topography there where the playground's at, and it has some walls and some railings, so I hate to really lose that. So if it did move from there, Glenn came up with the idea of using it for picnicking and taking out all the mulch and putting in crushed granite and some stationary tables that people could come and kind of enjoy that space. So that was a good recycle of that space. But hopefully we get some feedback from council, and we can come back to you maybe in February and get some feedback from you guys. McKenna was one of the playgrounds that was talked about in the 2014 bond program. And it's the last one of that group to be done. I'm not sure if we have enough money for it in the bond program, so we have to use the McKenna Trust Fund or 915, 916 money to help get that playground updated, which it needs.
And Parks Foundation.
Yeah, and the Parks Foundation.
Kind of old, and she was a baby.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's extended its lifespan. I think we did some replacements last summer on that one. But that's a long way to get around your answer, but that
Can I
would,
just say, for, like, as you're moving forward, I'm just gonna throw this out here, I know it's not on the agenda. Having kind of like the entrance of the park the way it is currently is almost impossible for someone with a stroller or a wheelchair because of the topography and the lack of sidewalks.
so, as part of that presentation that we're giving them, Glenn and I sat down and mapped out a trail around the entire perimeter of that park. It's a master plan, just to give you that idea. But I think the part of the redevelopment of that road is going to be a trail that would not just be a sidewalk, but a curvilinear trail along Bonnie Bray, but also not right up against the curb. You know, pull back a little bit so you could use it for park enjoyment, but you could also use it for point A to point B going north.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
As well as a trail along Scripture. So those two trails would be done as part of the road improvements. Tentatively, that's not 100%.
Well, I'm just glad to know that that's the direction that you're thinking and moving.
Yeah.
Because that park is one of the reasons I wanted to get on this board. So,
Well, I'll send the board out the presentation once I'm done with it. And you guys can share it, you guys can watch it on TV or whatever.
Definitely, I think the street project will really determine eventually what that park's gonna look like.
So I need to go talk to planning and zoning.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, but also just to see what the layout of the street is and what the options are. You know, like Gary said, we'll be proposing a couple of different options for the actual playground location. We really wanna see that street's gonna really change in traffic flow, speed, and so the layout of the park is gonna be really, really important in terms of parking, walkability, how close now the playground is. One of the things that we were looking at specifically is that puts the, basketball court now closer to a busier street. I think the, playground is a little buffered, but the basketball court now is gonna be closer to what we, foresee as a busier roadway. Yeah. So that will,
It's gonna change so much.
I'm really worried about the trees around there. There's such nice established trees.
We're gonna
back
work
there.
around the trees.
Yeah.
All the plans work around the trees, about not touching any of them.
Okay. Because in the past, it sounded like the parking lot next to the playground was the idea, and just like massacring all that stuff back a year and a half
We had a
ago.
little wall at the bottom for the icy days when people. I'm just kidding.
I'm gonna show you real quick, but I'll send this to you. So this is on option one, here's the parking lot off Thomas. As you can see, this is kind of meandering along. Here's your sidewalk here and your sidewalk here. These aren't located, there's topography here, so we'd have to do more topography analysis here. Then the next one is the parking lot where it's at right now. This is gonna be closed, so you'd be coming off Scripture. The roundabout is right here. This is the house that's going away. And then option three, we have the playground up here and no parking lot. So kind of going back to the neighborhood concept that we talked about earlier, is you're parking on the street. If we decided we didn't want to put a parking lot there, you can park on Thomas. There's enough space there. I don't know if that's a preferred option, but it was just something for council and for you guys to consider. And then the fourth one is moving the playground somewhere up in this area, getting it away from Scripture and putting a parking lot up in here, kind of trying to work around the trees there. And then reusing this for like picnic tables or something of that nature. So those are just three concepts we came up with for discussion purposes.
Where would the basketball court go?
It's still right here.
It would remain there.
Yeah, well, I don't like it. I don't like it where it's at. I think we try to figure out where to put that at some point in time. But, you know,
It's quite a bit.
yeah, I mean, I just foresee a basketball coming out here. I don't know how often it happens or not. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, okay.
So if the playground got moved up over there, would you have to change that hill because it's really steep?
Well, we'd have to either do some grading right here, kind of similar to what we did here, because this is actually 2 levels here.
Right.
So the idea was try to figure out, and we literally haven't gone out there and marked off how it would work.
Yeah.
We just did this all kind of on an aerial. So we still have some work to do in regards to that.
Any additional questions, concerns, comments regarding funding? Before we adjourn, I just wanted to thank y'all for bringing the samples, and if you haven't had a chance to walk on the samples, which he really wasn't lying, stolen. And this, this is not what I pictured. And from the pictures, this is not what I pictured. Yeah, basically, but I get it now that I can hold it, touch it. Does it come this size, or does it come in sheets? How does
That's it, and you piece it together like Legos.
We actually put some of those in at the cabin that we have, and we pulled cars up there and.
So this one is it's one of the highest rated for permeable pavement, and it's fire lane rated, so that's the highest rating, so that you can pull your fire trucks on fluid.
I didn't realize that's what you were talking about this whole time.
I know,
And you really never actually see it once the grass is there.
And if you do put grass,
Yeah.
you hardly see it, and it doesn't affect the grass when you drive over it too, that you're not crushing the roots of the grass. And if you put gravel, in it, then it's minimal maintenance on the gravel also.
And it holds
The
it.
gravel has more of a permeability, so with the rain washing through it, than the actual grass. It's, gaps bigger with the gravel than it is dirt.
so are y'all drawn to one of the samples of the truss more than the other?
I think they're all, I mean,
Yeah, that's
they're all
what
good.
I did. I have to feel it with my
All
feet.
pretty cool.
You gotta go try it out. Ben's taking his shoes off.
Is this considered a special event?
No.
Because George has access to a lot of alcohol.
That's after the meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was like,
All right, so I made
first we get business done.
I have a motion to adjourn
Well,
the meeting.
before you do
Wait.
that, just as a point of making a process, I think we didn't ask if there's any items for new business next time.
Including ours.
any items for business next time? You have something, obviously.
I don't, I was just making sure we didn't leave it out.
I don't know if this is an item for next time or not. I was just wondering, about we do have the sample of the parking lot for the, dog park. They're just kind of wondering what the status is on, the last
So-
time, okay,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but
That's okay.
we're not building a parking lot at the dog park.
no parking lot.
No, the option that council approved was the one also that park board approved, and it doesn't contain a parking lot for the dog park. For the dog park, we're gonna dress up the area that the RC field is at. So
Okay.
that would be a shared park.
So what was, I
So
thought you
this
said,
will be for South Lakes Park playground
okay,
behind Metzler's.
That little entrance in there.
Yeah, Metzler's.
Yeah,
And.
that's for the park,
Okay.
for the parking.
so you could technically,
Yes,
Park
so
lot
if
and go
we
to the dog
decided, if we decided later on that we wanted to put the parking lot next to Linda McNatt that we originally talked about, this would, an item like this is what we would use, permeable parking. So we wanna keep the heat island effect down and use permeable parking on what we do in the park system. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to build, permeable parking lot in certain areas, but everywhere that we can, we will. So in the areas that we determine right now, due to topography and everything else that we got to do, is very permeable parking. So in the future, if we need a parking lot at North Dog Park, then this is what we do, is at South Lakes, parking, at South Lakes and Playground, behind us, this is what we now are using in the courses of the center. So.
And y'all talked about filling it with crushed granite. Is that, am I remembering that correctly?
Use gravel, cleans,
Yeah.
So all different kinds of crushed rock. So, but you wanted a update for the dog park next time?
no, I was just wondering about what, I never followed up with the council meeting. I was
Oh, okay.
kind of wondering what the whole, what ended up happening.
Okay, well, we can give a dog park update next one.
Sure.
Right, all the time.
Or we can send that to you, part of the discussion, and then,
I was also curious about the American Legion Senior Center, if that went through or not,
It hasn't, it's gonna be going out to bid.
it's still.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm
But
sorry,
the
I didn't
council-
follow the question, Gary.
American Legion's gonna be going out to bid.
But council they forwarded it to that point, so.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah, they gave us,
Uh,
move forward with bids and design, so that's kind of where we're at. Working through some logistics of that right now, but
Are you asking for an update on?
I was just, I lost track of where it was, we talked, it's been a while since. I don't
Trying
think
to
we
get
need a
something
formal
out.
update I
Very
mean,
quickly.
this isn't,
Is it giving me call American Legion?
as far as, no one's told us to change it, yeah.
Any additional items?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion, second. Meeting is opposed.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?